The morning sun cast long shadows across Heathrow Airport's private terminal as security guard Marcus Thompson began his routine shift. At 52 years old, Marcus had seen everything during his 15 years working airport security. He had searched celebrity luggage, investigated suspicious packages, and dealt with difficult passengers from all walks of life. But nothing could have prepared him for what he would discover on this particular Tuesday morning in October. Marcus arrived at his post 30 minutes early, as was his habit. He believed in being thorough and professional, qualities that had earned him respect among his colleagues and superiors. The private terminal was quieter than the main airport, serving wealthy business people, celebrities, and occasionally, members of the British royal family. Today's schedule showed only 3 departures, including one high-profile passenger that caught his attention. Tom Parker Bowles, the son of Queen Camilla, was scheduled to depart at 11:30 a.m. on a private jet bound for Paris. Marcus had processed royal family members before, but this would be his first time handling someone so closely connected to the current queen consort. The paperwork indicated that Mr. Parker Bowles was traveling for a food documentary project, his well-known career as a food writer and critic taking him across Europe. As Marcus reviewed the security protocols, he noticed his supervisor, Janet Mills, approaching with a serious expression. Janet had been working airport security for over 20 years and rarely showed concern about routine procedures. Her worried look immediately put Marcus on alert. "Marcus, I need to brief you about today's VIP passenger," Janet said, lowering her voice despite the empty terminal. "We've received some unusual intelligence from customs. There are concerns about potential smuggling activities involving high-value items on private jets. Nothing specific, but we need to be extra vigilant with all searches today." Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Smuggling operations often targeted private terminals, assuming that wealthy passengers would receive less scrutiny than commercial travelers. The irony was that private jet passengers often carried more valuable items, making thorough searches even more critical. "What kind of items should I be looking for?" Marcus asked, pulling out his inspection checklist. "Artwork, jewelry, historical artifacts, anything that might be leaving the country without proper documentation," Janet explained. "The Customs Department has been tracking several missing pieces from estate sales and private collections. Some items might be stolen, others might be tax evasion attempts." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the private jet crew. Captain Sarah Williams and co-pilot David Chen began their pre-flight preparations while flight attendant Marie Dubois prepared the cabin. Marcus had worked with this crew several times before and found them professional and cooperative during security procedures. At 10:45 a.m., a black Range Rover pulled up to the terminal entrance. Marcus watched through the window as Tom Parker Bowles stepped out, accompanied by 2 assistants carrying multiple pieces of luggage. Even from a distance, Marcus could see that the luggage appeared unusually heavy for a short business trip to Paris. Tom Parker Bowles entered the terminal with a confident stride, greeting the staff with the practiced charm of someone accustomed to VIP treatment. He wore an expensive-looking navy blue suit and carried a leather briefcase that appeared well-worn from frequent travel. His demeanor was friendly but slightly impatient, checking his watch repeatedly. "Good morning, Mr. Parker Bowles," Marcus said professionally. "I'm Marcus Thompson, and I'll be conducting your security screening today. This is standard procedure for all private jet passengers." "Of course, no problem at all," Tom replied with a smile. "I'm quite familiar with the process. Just eager to get to Paris for my filming schedule." Marcus began the routine screening process, starting with the standard metal detector and bag X-ray procedures. The briefcase and personal items passed through without incident. However, when the larger luggage pieces went through the X-ray machine, Marcus noticed several dense, irregularly shaped objects that didn't match typical travel items. "Could you please open these bags for manual inspection?" Marcus asked politely, maintaining his professional tone despite growing curiosity about the unusual X-ray images. Tom's friendly demeanor shifted slightly, and Marcus detected a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Is there a problem? I'm running a bit behind schedule and the crew is ready for departure." "Just routine procedure, sir. Won't take long," Marcus assured him, though his instincts were now fully alert. In his 15 years of experience, he had learned to read passengers' reactions, and Tom's sudden change in behavior raised red flags. As Marcus opened the first suitcase, He found it packed with what appeared to be high-end camera equipment and filming supplies, consistent with Tom's stated purpose for travel. However, the weight distribution seemed off, and Marcus noticed that some equipment cases felt much heavier than they should. "Could you explain these equipment cases?" Marcus asked, pointing to several black cases that had shown up as particularly dense on the X-ray. "Camera lenses and lighting equipment," Tom replied quickly. "Very expensive gear for the documentary shoot. Everything is properly insured and documented." Marcus carefully opened the first equipment case, expecting to find camera lenses. Instead, he discovered something that made his heart skip a beat. Nestled in custom foam padding was an ornate golden chalice, clearly very old and extremely valuable. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate engravings and what appeared to be precious gemstones embedded around the rim. The discovery sent shockwaves through Marcus's system. This was definitely not camera equipment, and the chalice's appearance suggested it was a significant historical artifact. His training kicked in immediately, and he knew he had to handle this situation with extreme care and discretion. "Sir, I'm going to need to examine all of your luggage more thoroughly," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Please have a seat while I complete the inspection." Tom's face had gone pale, and he sat down heavily in one of the terminal's leather chairs. Marcus could see the man's hands trembling slightly as he reached for his phone, presumably to call someone for help or advice. As Marcus continued his search, he realized that this routine security check was about to become the most significant case of his career. The golden chalice was just the beginning, and he suspected that the remaining luggage would reveal even more shocking discoveries. The private terminal, usually a place of quiet efficiency and luxury, had suddenly become the center of what could be a major international incident involving the royal family. Stolen treasures and questions that would reach the highest levels of British society. Marcus Thompson's hands moved methodically through the second equipment case, his 15 years of security experience guiding him, despite the extraordinary nature of his discovery. The golden chalice sat on the inspection table like an accusation, its gemstones catching the fluorescent light of the terminal. Tom Parker Bowles remained seated, his phone pressed to his ear in what appeared to be an urgent conversation conducted in hushed tones. The second case revealed another shock. Wrapped in black velvet cloth was an ornate silver serving tray, clearly antique and bearing the unmistakable engravings of royal insignia. Marcus recognized the distinctive markings from his security training materials about items that might pass through airports. This wasn't just any antique. The coat of arms and intricate detailing suggested this piece belonged to the British Royal Collection. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he photographed each item with the terminal's documentation camera. Protocol required him to record everything before making any decisions about confiscation or further investigation. The silver tray was heavier than it appeared, and the craftsmanship spoke of centuries-old royal traditions. "Mr. Parker Bowles," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the small terminal, "I need you to provide documentation for these items. Import and export papers, insurance certificates, anything that proves legal ownership." Tom ended his phone call and approached the inspection table with visible reluctance. His earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by the nervous energy of someone caught in an impossible situation. He fumbled through his briefcase, producing several folders of documents. "These are filming permits and equipment manifests," Tom said, his voice lacking conviction. "The production company handles all the paperwork for our equipment." Marcus reviewed the documents carefully. The permits were legitimate, issued by the French Ministry of Culture for documentary filming in various Parisian locations. However, there was no mention of valuable antiques, ceremonial objects, or anything resembling the items he had discovered. The equipment manifest listed standard filming gear, cameras, lights, microphones, and editing equipment, but made no reference to golden chalices or royal silver. The third case yielded the most stunning discovery yet. As Marcus lifted the foam padding, he found himself staring at what could only be described as a crown. Not a full ceremonial crown like those used in coronations, but a smaller, more delicate piece that might be worn by a member of the royal family at state functions. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, with dozens of pearls and what appeared to be genuine diamonds, arranged in intricate patterns. Marcus had seen photographs of similar pieces in security, briefings about items that might be targeted by thieves or smugglers. The crown bore a strong resemblance to pieces he remembered from educational materials about the royal family's extensive collection of ceremonial jewelry and regalia. "Sir, I'm going to need you to remain seated while I contact my supervisor," Marcus announced, his training taking over completely. The situation had escalated far beyond his authority to handle independently. The discovery of what appeared to be crown jewels required immediate involvement from higher authorities. Tom slumped in his chair, the weight of the situation clearly overwhelming him. "Look, Marcus, this is all a terrible misunderstanding. I can explain everything if you'll just give me a moment to sort this out." But Marcus was already dialing Janet Mills's extension. As airport security supervisor, Janet would need to involve customs officials, and depending on the nature of the items, potentially Scotland Yard's Art and Antiques Unit. The discovery of royal treasures on a private jet was unprecedented in Marcus's experience. "Janet, I need you in Terminal 7 immediately," Marcus said when his supervisor answered. "We have a situation that requires your immediate attention and probably customs involvement." While waiting for Janet to arrive, Marcus continued his inspection of the remaining luggage. The fourth case contained more silver pieces, ornate candlesticks, serving spoons, and decorative plates, all bearing royal insignia. Each item was carefully wrapped and padded, suggesting whoever packed them understood their value and fragility. The fifth and final case proved to be the most shocking discovery of all. As Marcus lifted the protective covering, he found himself looking at what appeared to be historical documents in protective sleeves. The papers were old, written in elegant script, and bore official seals that looked distinctly royal. While Marcus couldn't read the archaic language clearly, he could make out dates suggesting these documents were centuries old. One document in particular caught his attention. Though the writing was in formal English that was difficult to decipher, he could clearly see signatures at the bottom and what appeared to be royal seals pressed into red wax. If these were genuine historical documents from the royal archives, their value would be immeasurable, and their unauthorized removal from Britain would constitute a serious crime. Janet Mills arrived within minutes, her face grave as she took in the scene. The inspection table now held an array of items that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than in the luggage of a food writer traveling to Paris. Her eyes widened as she examined each piece, immediately understanding the severity of the situation. "My God, Marcus," Janet whispered, careful not to let Tom overhear. "Do you realize what you found here? These items, if they're authentic, we're looking at pieces that belong in Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle." The weight of responsibility settled on Marcus's shoulders as he realized the implications of his discovery. This wasn't just a case of undeclared valuable items or potential tax evasion. If these were genuine pieces from the royal collection, questions would arise about how Tom Parker Bowles had acquired them, and why he was attempting to transport them out of the country without proper authorization. Janet immediately began making phone calls, first to customs officials and then to Scotland Yard. The terminal's quiet atmosphere was about to be shattered by an investigation that would involve some of Britain's most senior law enforcement officials. Tom Parker Bowles sat in his chair, occasionally glancing at his phone but no longer making calls. The reality of his situation seemed to be sinking in, and Marcus could see the man wrestling with decisions about what to say and how to explain the presence of what appeared to be royal treasures in his luggage. Captain Williams approached the security area, clearly concerned about the delay to their departure schedule. "Is there a problem with the flight?" she asked. "We're ready for takeoff, but we've been waiting for over an hour." "The flight is canceled," Janet informed her firmly. "Please secure the aircraft. No one leaves until we've completed our investigation." As Marcus looked at the array of priceless artifacts spread across the inspection table, he realized that his routine morning shift had uncovered what might be one of the most significant cases of attempted artifact smuggling in British history. The son of the Queen Consort, caught with royal treasures, facing questions that could reach the very heart of the monarchy itself. Detective Inspector Sarah Crawford arrived at Heathrow's private terminal within 2 hours of Janet Mills's call to Scotland Yard. As head of the Metropolitan Police's Art and Antiques Unit, Crawford had investigated countless cases involving stolen artwork, smuggled artifacts, and cultural heritage crimes. However, She had never encountered a case with such potential political ramifications. Crawford was a seasoned investigator in her mid-40s, known throughout the force for her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to handle sensitive cases involving high-profile individuals. Her reputation for discretion and thoroughness had earned her assignments involving celebrities, politicians, and even minor royals in the past, but nothing quite like this situation. Marcus Thompson watched as Detective Inspector Crawford examined each artifact with the careful eye of someone who understood both their historical significance and their potential value as evidence. She wore white cotton gloves and used a magnifying glass to examine hallmarks, engravings, and other identifying features that could help establish provenance and authenticity. "Mr. Thompson, you've done excellent work here," Crawford said, looking up from her examination of the golden chalice. "Your attention to detail and proper documentation may have prevented a significant cultural heritage crime." The detective's praise meant everything to Marcus, who had been questioning whether he had overreacted to the unusual luggage contents. The arrival of Scotland Yard's Art and Antiques unit confirmed that his instincts had been correct, and that the situation was indeed as serious as he had suspected. Tom Parker Bowles had requested legal representation and was now accompanied by a solicitor from one of London's most prestigious law firms. The lawyer, James Whitfield, was known for representing high-profile clients in complex criminal matters. His presence indicated that the Parker Bowles family was taking the situation extremely seriously. "Inspector Crawford," Whitfield began, his voice measured and professional, "my client is prepared to cooperate fully with your investigation. However, I must stress that there may be explanations for these items that don't involve any criminal activity." Crawford nodded politely but continued her examination of the artifacts. The silver serving pieces all bore identical royal insignia, suggesting they were part of a matching set rather than random items. The crown contained what appeared to be genuine pearls and diamonds, with craftsmanship consistent with pieces known to be in the royal collection. The historical documents proved particularly intriguing. Crawford had called in Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, a forensic document examiner and historical expert from the British Library, to assess their authenticity and potential significance. Dr. Hartwell arrived with specialized equipment for examining old paper, ink, and seals without damaging the documents. "These appear to be genuine 18th century documents," Dr. Hartwell announced after an hour of careful examination. "The paper composition, ink chemistry, and seal impressions are all consistent with royal correspondence from that period. If authentic, these documents would be considered invaluable historical artifacts." The implications of Dr. Hartwell's assessment sent shockwaves through the investigation team. Genuine historical documents from the Royal Archives would be among the most carefully guarded items in Britain's cultural heritage collections. Their presence in Tom Parker Bowles's luggage raised questions about access to restricted areas of royal palaces and potential security breaches. Crawford decided to interview Tom directly, despite his solicitor's presence. The interview room at the nearby police station had been specially prepared with recording equipment and security measures appropriate for such a sensitive case. "Mr. Parker Bowles," Crawford began, "can you explain how these items came to be in your possession?" Tom glanced at his solicitor before answering. "Inspector, I understand how this looks, but I want to assure you that I believed I was acting within my rights. These items were given to me by my mother, Queen Camilla, for a very specific purpose related to my documentary work." The explanation sent ripples through the room. If Tom was claiming that Queen Camilla had authorized him to transport these items, the investigation would need to involve the royal household and potentially create a diplomatic incident within the royal family itself. "Can you provide documentation of this authorization?" Crawford asked, maintaining her professional composure despite the bombshell revelation. "That's where the situation becomes complicated," Tom admitted. "The authorization was verbal, given during a private family conversation. My mother mentioned that I could use some family pieces as props for historical segments in my documentary about British culinary traditions." Crawford made detailed notes while considering the implications of Tom's explanation. Even if Queen Camilla had given verbal permission for her son to use family pieces, the removal of items from royal palaces typically required extensive documentation and approval from multiple authorities. including the Royal Collection Trust and various security departments. Mr. Parker Bowles, are you claiming that these items belong to your family personally, or are you acknowledging that they are part of the official royal collection? Crawford asked, cutting to the heart of the legal issues surrounding the case. The distinction was crucial. Items that belonged personally to the royal family could potentially be disposed of at their discretion, though even then, items of historical significance might be subject to cultural heritage protection laws. However, if the items were part of the official royal collection, they would be held in trust for the nation and could not be removed without proper authorization. Tom's solicitor whispered urgently in his client's ear before Tom responded. Inspector, I'm not entirely certain of the legal status of these items. I assumed they were family pieces that my mother could authorize me to use. But I'm beginning to realize the situation may be more complex than I understood. Crawford had encountered many cases where well-meaning individuals had unknowingly violated cultural heritage laws, but the involvement of the Queen Consort's son made this situation unprecedented. The detective knew she would need to contact the royal household to verify Tom's claims and determine the official status of the confiscated items. Meanwhile, Marcus Thompson continued to provide support to the investigation team, helping to catalog and secure each artifact according to evidence handling procedures. His discovery had evolved into a full-scale investigation, involving multiple law enforcement agencies and potentially reaching the highest levels of the British government. The private terminal remained closed to other flights while the investigation continued. Airport security had established a perimeter around the area, and additional officers had been brought in to ensure the scene's integrity and prevent media attention from disrupting the proceedings. As the day progressed, Crawford realized that this case would require delicate handling to balance the needs of law enforcement with the political sensitivities surrounding the royal family. The detective's next step would be to contact Buckingham Palace and request an urgent meeting with officials from the royal household to discuss the status of the confiscated items and the authorization claims made by Tom Parker Bowles. The investigation had transformed from a routine airport security matter into a case that could potentially embarrass the monarchy and raise questions about security procedures at royal palaces, access to priceless artifacts, and the responsibilities of royal family members in protecting Britain's cultural heritage. The call from Buckingham Palace came at precisely 4:30 p.m., just as Detective Inspector Crawford was preparing to reach out to the royal household herself. The voice on the other end belonged to Sir Michael Stevens, keeper of the privy purse and the man responsible for managing the royal family's financial affairs and, crucially, the royal collection. Inspector Crawford, I understand you have a rather delicate situation involving items that may belong to the crown. Sir Michael's voice was measured but carried an unmistakable note of urgency. I've been authorized by Her Majesty to provide full cooperation with your investigation. Crawford felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The involvement of such a senior royal official confirmed the significance of the artifacts Marcus had discovered, but it also meant the case had reached the very highest levels of the monarchy. Every decision from this point forward would be scrutinized by individuals with direct access to the king himself. Sir Michael, we have confiscated several items that appear to be valuable antiques and historical documents. The suspect claims they were provided by Queen Camilla for use in a documentary project. Can you verify whether such authorization was given? There was a long pause on the line, and Crawford could hear muffled voices in the background suggesting that Sir Michael was consulting with other officials. When he returned to the conversation, his tone had become even more serious. Inspector, I'm afraid the situation is more complicated than it initially appeared. I'm going to need to examine the items personally before I can provide you with a complete answer. Would it be possible for me to visit your location within the hour? Crawford agreed immediately, understanding that cooperation with the royal household was essential for resolving the case properly. While waiting for Sir Michael's arrival, she decided to interview some of the airport staff and flight crew to gather additional information about Tom Parker Bowles' behavior and the circumstances surrounding his planned departure. Captain Sarah Williams, the pilot of the chartered jet, provided the first hint that something had been unusual about the flight arrangement. Normally, Mr. Parker Bowles books his flights through his production company's travel department, she explained. But this trip was arranged very last minute, and he personally handled all the booking details. He seemed quite anxious about the departure time and kept emphasizing the importance of leaving exactly on schedule. Flight attendant Marie Dubois added another piece to the puzzle. Mr. Parker Bowles specifically requested that his luggage be stored in the climate-controlled cargo area rather than the standard baggage compartment. He said the items were sensitive to temperature and humidity changes. At the time, I assumed he was carrying expensive filming equipment, but his concern seemed excessive for normal camera gear. Marcus Thompson, who had been observing these interviews, realized that his initial instincts about the passenger's nervous behavior had been correct. Tom's demeanor had raised red flags from the moment he arrived at the terminal, and the flight crew's observations suggested he was aware that his luggage contained something more valuable than filming equipment. Sir Michael Stevens arrived at Heathrow, accompanied by two other officials, Dr. Caroline Webb, Deputy Surveyor of the Queen's Works of Art, and Commander Robert Hayes from the Royal Protection Unit. Their presence transformed the airport security office into an impromptu command center for what was rapidly becoming a crisis involving the highest levels of government. Dr. Webb immediately began examining the artifacts with the expertise of someone who had spent decades managing the royal collection. Her reactions were telling. She recognized several pieces immediately and handled them with the reverence reserved for items of extraordinary historical significance. Inspector Crawford, I can confirm that these items are indeed part of the royal collection, Dr. Webb announced after completing her examination. The golden chalice is from the reign of George III, and the silver serving pieces are part of a set commissioned by Queen Victoria. The crown is a ceremonial piece worn by Queen Alexandra, and these documents— She paused, carefully examining the historical papers. These appear to be original correspondence between King George IV and various European monarchs. The confirmation sent shockwaves through the investigation team. If these items were officially part of the royal collection, their unauthorized removal from royal palaces constituted a serious crime, regardless of any family relationship or claimed verbal authorization. Sir Michael Stevens took control of the situation with the authority of someone accustomed to managing royal crises. Inspector, I need to inform you that Queen Camilla has categorically denied giving any authorization for these items to be removed from royal properties. In fact, Her Majesty was unaware that these particular pieces were missing until we conducted an emergency inventory this afternoon. Tom Parker Bowles, who had been sitting quietly with his solicitor, visibly paled at this revelation. The foundation of his defense, that his mother had given him permission to use family pieces, had just been demolished by the most authoritative source possible. Furthermore, Sir Michael continued, our preliminary investigation suggests that these items were taken from Clarence House and Highgrove House over a period of several weeks. Security footage is being reviewed to determine exactly when and how the removals occurred. Commander Hayes stepped forward to address the law enforcement aspects of the case. Inspector Crawford, this situation now involves potential security breaches at royal residences. We'll need to coordinate with the Metropolitan Police to investigate how these items were accessed and removed without triggering our security protocols. Crawford realized that the case had evolved far beyond a simple smuggling investigation. The involvement of multiple royal residences, sophisticated security systems, and valuable historical artifacts suggested a level of planning and access that raised serious questions about the security of Britain's most important cultural treasures. Dr. Webb provided additional context that made the situation even more serious. These particular items were selected very carefully. They represent some of the most portable and valuable pieces in the royal collection. The person who chose them understood their significance and knew exactly where to find them within the palaces. The implication was clear. This was not a random or opportunistic theft. Someone with detailed knowledge of the royal collection and access to multiple royal residences had systematically selected and removed items over an extended period. Tom's solicitor requested a private consultation with his client, and Crawford agreed to a short recess while the legal team discussed their options. The evidence against Tom was becoming overwhelming, and his initial explanation had been completely discredited by the royal officials. Marcus Thompson watched the proceedings with amazement, realizing that his routine security check had uncovered what might be the most significant theft from the royal collection in modern history. The quiet professionalism he had maintained throughout the day had been instrumental in preventing priceless artifacts from leaving the country permanently. As the investigation entered its next phase, Crawford knew that the case would require careful coordination between multiple law enforcement agencies, the royal household, and potentially the highest levels of government. The arrest of Queen Camilla's son for theft from the royal collection would create a scandal that could reverberate throughout the monarchy and British society. The private terminal at Heathrow had become the center of a crisis that would test the relationship between law enforcement and the royal family, while raising fundamental questions about security, access, and accountability within the institutions that guard Britain's most precious cultural heritage. The emergency meeting convened at Scotland Yard later that evening brought together representatives from the highest levels of British law enforcement and the royal establishment. Detective Inspector Crawford found herself in the unprecedented position of leading a briefing that included the Commissioner of Metropolitan Police, the Director of Public Prosecutions, and senior officials from the royal household. The conference room was secured with additional measures typically reserved for matters of national security. The sensitivity of arresting a member of the royal family, even an extended member, required careful consideration of legal, constitutional, and diplomatic implications that extended far beyond typical criminal proceedings. Commissioner Patricia Hamilton opened the meeting with a stark assessment of the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a case that has no modern precedent. The evidence against Mr. Parker Bowles is substantial, but the decision to proceed with charges must consider the broader implications for the monarchy and public confidence in our institutions. Sir Michael Stevens presented the royal household's position with characteristic precision. From our perspective, the rule of law must apply equally to all citizens, regardless of their family connections. However, we are deeply concerned about the security breaches this case has revealed and the potential damage to the monarchy's reputation. Crawford provided a detailed summary of the evidence collected thus far. The investigation had expanded to include forensic analysis of the artifacts, review of security footage from multiple royal residences, and interviews with palace staff who might have witnessed suspicious activity over the previous months. Our forensic team has confirmed that Mr. Parker Bowles's fingerprints are present on several of the items, Crawford reported. Additionally, security footage from Clarence House shows him removing items from display cases on at least 3 separate occasions over the past 6 weeks. The evidence painted a picture of systematic theft rather than a single impulsive act. Tom had used his legitimate access to royal residences as Queen Camilla's son to gradually remove valuable items, presumably with the intention of selling them abroad or using them for undisclosed purposes. Dr. Caroline Webb from the Royal Collection provided expert testimony about the item's significance and value. The total value of the recovered artifacts exceeds £12 million, she announced, causing audible gasps around the room. More importantly, their historical significance is immeasurable. Some of these pieces have been in continuous royal custody for over 2 centuries. The astronomical value elevated the case from simple theft to one of the most significant art crimes in British history. The international implications were also substantial, as the items were being transported to France, potentially for sale to private collectors or foreign institutions. Director of Public Prosecutions Michael Chen addressed the legal complexities of prosecuting a royal family member. While Mr. Parker Bowles's family connections do not place him above the law, we must consider the constitutional implications of charging the Queen Consort's son with theft from the Crown. This case will require careful handling to maintain public confidence in both the justice system and the monarchy. Commander Hayes provided an update on the security investigation that was running parallel to the criminal case. Our review has identified several vulnerabilities in the security protocols at royal residences. Mr. Parker Bowles exploited his legitimate access and the trust placed in family members to bypass normal security measures. The security failures were particularly concerning because they suggested that other valuable items might have been removed from royal properties over the years without detection. The royal household was conducting comprehensive inventories of all royal residences to determine if additional items were missing. Meanwhile, Back at Heathrow, Marcus Thompson was completing his detailed report of the day's events. His supervisor, Janet Mills, had praised his professionalism and attention to detail, noting that his thorough search had prevented a cultural heritage disaster. "Marcus, your work today may have saved artifacts that belong to the entire nation," Janet said as they reviewed his documentation. "The Royal Collection Trust has already expressed their gratitude for your diligence." The media attention surrounding the case was being carefully managed by both the royal household and Scotland. Yard news of Tom Parker Bowles's detention had leaked to several newspapers, but officials were working to control the narrative and prevent speculation that might interfere with the investigation. Tom's legal team was exploring various defense strategies, including claims of misunderstanding about the item's ownership status and arguments about his legitimate access to royal properties as a family member. However, the evidence of systematic removal and attempted international transport made these defenses increasingly difficult to maintain. The psychological profile being developed by forensic psychologists suggested that Tom might have been motivated by financial pressures related to his documentary projects or personal expenses. His career as a food writer, while successful, had not generated the kind of wealth that would support his lifestyle without additional income sources. Queen Camilla had remained largely out of the public eye since news of her son's arrest broke. Palace sources indicated that she was cooperating fully with the investigation while maintaining her official duties as queen consort. The situation placed her in the impossible position of supporting law enforcement while dealing with the personal trauma of her son's alleged crimes. The international implications of the case were also becoming clear. Interpol had been notified to check for any connections to art trafficking networks, and French authorities were investigating potential buyers who might have been expecting to receive the stolen artifacts. Crawford's investigation had revealed that Tom had made several unexplained trips to Paris over the previous months, often returning with large amounts of cash that he deposited into various bank accounts. Financial investigators were tracing these transactions to determine if he had already sold other items from the royal collection. The case was also prompting a broader review of security procedures at all royal residences. The ability of a family member to systematically remove valuable artifacts over several weeks without detection suggested serious flaws in inventory management and access control systems. Expert witnesses were being consulted to determine the full extent of the cultural heritage violations. Some of the historical documents appeared to be unique items that could never be replaced if lost, making their recovery crucial for preserving British historical records. As the evening progressed, it became clear that the decision to formally charge Tom Parker Bowles would need to be made at the highest levels of government. The Prime Minister's office had been briefed on the situation, and constitutional experts were advising on the precedents and procedures for prosecuting extended members of the royal family. The case had transformed from Marcus Thompson's routine security check into a constitutional crisis that would test the balance between royal privilege and the rule of law in modern Britain. The next 24 hours would determine whether the monarchy could weather the scandal of having one of its own accused of stealing the nation's most precious cultural treasures. The morning brought unexpected developments that would reshape the entire investigation. Detective Inspector Crawford arrived at Scotland Yard to find an urgent message from the forensic accounting team that had been analyzing Tom Parker Bowles's financial records overnight. The discoveries they made would prove to be the missing piece of a much larger puzzle. "Inspector, we found evidence of a sophisticated international art trafficking operation," announced Detective Sergeant Alan Morris, the lead financial investigator. Mr. Parker Bowles wasn't acting alone, and this appears to be just one part of a much broader scheme involving stolen artifacts from multiple sources. The financial investigation had uncovered a network of shell companies, offshore bank accounts, and encrypted communications that suggested Tom was working with international art dealers who specialized in moving stolen cultural artifacts. The operation extended far beyond the royal collection and included items from private estates, museums, and other historic houses across Britain. Crawford immediately recognized the implications. If Tom was part of an organized criminal network, the case would require coordination with international law enforcement agencies and could potentially expose a criminal enterprise that had been Operating for years without detection, the breakthrough came from analyzing Tom's encrypted communications, which had been decrypted by Scotland Yard's cybercrime unit overnight. The messages revealed detailed discussions with individuals in France, Switzerland, and the United States about the sale of special items from prestigious British collections. One particular conversation was especially damning. In messages exchanged just 3 days before his planned departure, Tom had provided photographs and detailed descriptions of the royal artifacts to a contact identified only as the collector. The TO response indicated that a buyer in Geneva was prepared to pay £15 million for the complete collection. Sir Michael Stevens was immediately briefed on these developments, and his reaction reflected the gravity of the new evidence. "This isn't just theft anymore," he said grimly. "This is organized crime targeting Britain's cultural heritage on an international scale." The royal collection was just one of their targets. The investigation team was expanded to include specialists from the National Crime Agency and Interpol. The case had evolved from a single incident involving royal artifacts into a major international investigation that could potentially recover stolen items from multiple sources and dismantle an entire criminal network. Marcus Thompson was called back to Scotland Yard to provide additional testimony about his observations of Tom's behavior and any details that might help investigators understand the planned smuggling operation. His meticulous documentation of the search and his professional handling of the evidence had become crucial elements in building the broader case. "Mr. Thompson, your instincts and thoroughness may have helped us uncover one of the most significant art trafficking operations in recent history," Crawford told him during his interview. "The items you discovered were apparently just a small sample of what this network has been stealing and selling." The expanded investigation revealed that Tom's documentary projects had provided perfect cover for his criminal activities. His legitimate travel to historic locations across Europe gave him opportunities to scout potential targets and establish relationships with buyers who were interested in acquiring stolen British artifacts. Queen Camilla's position had become even more precarious as the scope of the investigation widened. Palace sources indicated that she had been completely unaware of her son's criminal activities and was cooperating fully with investigators, even providing access to her personal communications and financial records to help rule out any unwitting involvement. The international implications were becoming clearer as law enforcement agencies in multiple countries began coordinating their efforts. Swiss authorities had already begun investigating the collector and several associated bank accounts that had been identified in Tom's communications. French police were examining potential connections to other recent thefts from historic chateaux and museums. Several unsolved cases involving missing artifacts from prestigious French collections showed similarities to the methods used in the British thefts, suggesting the criminal network had been operating across multiple countries. The pressure on Tom to cooperate with investigators was intensifying as the evidence against him continued to mount. His solicitor, James Whitfield, had begun negotiations with prosecutors about a potential plea agreement in exchange for his client's cooperation in dismantling the broader criminal network. "My client is prepared to provide full cooperation with the investigation," Whitfield announced during a meeting with Crawford and senior prosecutors. He recognizes the severity of his actions and wants to help recover all stolen items and identify other members of the criminal organization. The offer of cooperation came with significant conditions. Tom was requesting protection from potential retaliation by other members of the criminal network, and his legal team was seeking assurances about the charges he would face in his potential sentence. Dr. Caroline Webb was working with international experts to compile a comprehensive catalog of items that might have been stolen by the network. The process involved reviewing insurance claims, museum theft reports, and private collection inventories from across Europe and North America. "We're beginning to understand the true scope of this operation," Dr. Webb reported to the investigation team. "Preliminary estimates suggest they may have stolen and sold artifacts worth over £100 million during the past 5 years." The Royal Collection Trust was conducting its own internal investigation to determine how Tom had gained access to the stolen items and whether any palace staff had been involved, either willingly or unknowingly. The security review was examining everything from keycard access logs to staff schedules and visitor records. Commander Hayes from the Royal Protection Unit was implementing emergency security measures at all royal residences while the investigation continued. The vulnerability exposed by Tom's systematic thefts required immediate action to prevent further losses and restore confidence in the security of Britain's cultural treasures. The media attention surrounding the case was becoming increasingly difficult to manage as details of the international investigation began to leak to journalists. Several newspapers were preparing exposés about the art trafficking network, and palace officials were bracing for intense scrutiny of security procedures at royal residences. The Prime Minister's office was monitoring the situation closely, recognizing that the case could have significant diplomatic implications as international law enforcement cooperation expanded. The theft of cultural heritage items was increasingly being treated as a form of cultural terrorism that threatened national identity and historical continuity. As Crawford prepared for another day of intensive investigation, she reflected on how Marcus Thompson's routine security check had uncovered a criminal conspiracy that reached across continents and threatened some of the world's most precious cultural artifacts. The case had become one of the most complex and sensitive investigations of her career, with implications that would resonate far beyond the confines of law enforcement. The next phase of the investigation would focus on identifying and arresting other members of the criminal network, recovering additional stolen items, and ensuring that Tom Parker Bowles faced appropriate consequences for his role in what was emerging as one of the most significant art crimes in modern history. 6 months after Marcus Thompson's fateful discovery at Heathrow Airport, the international investigation had achieved remarkable success in dismantling one of the most sophisticated art trafficking networks in recent history. The case that began with a routine security check had evolved into Operation Heritage, a coordinated effort involving law enforcement agencies from 12 countries. Detective Inspector Crawford stood in the restored artifacts room at Scotland Yard, surrounded by recovered treasures that told the story of the network's extensive criminal activities. The royal collection items that Marcus had discovered were now joined by hundreds of other priceless artifacts that had been recovered from private collectors, auction houses, and storage facilities across 3 continents. The final tally was staggering. The criminal network had stolen and sold cultural artifacts worth over £200 million during their 5-year operation. Items ranged from medieval manuscripts and Renaissance paintings to ancient archaeological artifacts and, of course, the royal treasures that had first exposed their activities. Tom Parker Bowles had ultimately provided extensive cooperation with the investigation, leading to the arrest of 17 individuals across Europe and North America. His detailed testimony had helped investigators understand the network's methods, identify their victims, and trace the movement of stolen items through complex international supply chains. Without Mr. Parker Bowles's cooperation, we would never have uncovered the full extent of this operation, Crawford explained to the assembled media during a press conference announcing the conclusion of Operation Heritage. His decision to work with law enforcement was instrumental in recovering artifacts that might otherwise have been lost forever. The cooperation came at a significant personal cost to Tom. He had been sentenced to 4 years in prison for theft and conspiracy charges, though his sentence was reduced due to his cooperation with authorities. More importantly, his relationship with the royal family had been permanently damaged, and his career as a food writer and television personality was effectively over. Queen Camilla had maintained a dignified silence throughout the investigation, fulfilling her royal duties while dealing with the personal pain of her son's crimes. Palace sources indicated that she supported the legal process while working privately to ensure that all stolen royal items were properly returned and secured. Marcus Thompson had become something of a hero within the security community, receiving commendations from multiple law enforcement agencies and professional organizations. His attention to detail and professional instincts had not only prevented a significant cultural heritage crime, but had also exposed a criminal network that might have continued operating for years. "I was just doing my job," Marcus said modestly during an interview with Airport Security magazine. "But I'm proud that my work helped protect these incredible pieces of our cultural history." Every security professional should remember that routine procedures can sometimes uncover extraordinary crimes. The impact of the case extended far beyond law enforcement. Museums, historic houses, and private collectors worldwide had implemented new security measures and inventory procedures designed to prevent similar thefts. The art world had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the ease with which stolen items could enter legitimate markets. The Royal Collection Trust had conducted a comprehensive security review and implemented new protocols for managing access to valuable items. The vulnerability exposed by Tom's systematic thefts had led to significant improvements in inventory management, access controls, and staff training at all royal residences. Sir Michael Stevens reflected on the lessons learned during a speech to the International Conference on Cultural Heritage Protection. This case demonstrated that no institution, regardless of its prestige or security measures, is immune to sophisticated criminal activity. We must remain vigilant and continuously improve our protective measures. The international cooperation fostered by Operation Heritage had led to new agreements between countries for sharing information about stolen cultural artifacts and coordinating investigations of art trafficking networks. The case had become a model for how law enforcement agencies could work together to protect global cultural heritage. Dr. Caroline Webb had overseen the painstaking process of conserving and cataloging all recovered items. Many artifacts had suffered damage during their illegal transportation and storage, requiring extensive restoration work by teams of expert conservators. Some of these pieces will never fully recover from the trauma of their theft, Dr. Webb explained during a conservation workshop. But we've been able to save most of them, and they'll continue to tell their stories for future generations. The recovered royal artifacts had been returned to their proper places within the royal collection, though their brush with international crime had added an unexpected chapter to their historical significance. The golden chalice, silver serving pieces, ceremonial crown, and historical documents were now displayed, with enhanced security measures and detailed information about their recovery. The Swiss investigation had led to the arrest of the collector, who turned out to be a wealthy industrialist with a private museum filled with stolen artifacts. The recovery of his collection alone had resulted in the return of items to dozens of institutions across Europe and North America. Several major auction houses had been forced to review their authentication and provenance verification procedures after investigations revealed that they had unknowingly sold stolen items from the network. The scandal had led to industry-wide reforms designed to prevent similar situations in the future. The psychological impact of the case on the royal family had been significant, but manageable. King Charles III and Queen Camilla had worked with senior palace officials to address the security failures and restore public confidence in the protection of royal collections. As Detective Inspector Crawford reflected on the case. During her final report to the commissioner, she recognized that Marcus Thompson's discovery had achieved something far greater than preventing a single crime. It had exposed systemic vulnerabilities in cultural heritage, protection, and led to improvements that would benefit institutions worldwide. The private terminal at Heathrow Airport had returned to its quiet efficiency, but Marcus Thompson's legacy lived on in the enhanced security procedures and heightened awareness among all airport personnel. His story had become part of security training programs, reminding officers that vigilance and professionalism could make the difference between protecting and losing irreplaceable cultural treasures. The case of the royal treasures had demonstrated that even the most routine security check could uncover extraordinary crimes, and that the dedication of individual officers like Marcus Thompson remained the first line of defense in protecting the cultural heritage that belongs to all humanity. The golden chalice, silver plates, ceremonial crown, and historical documents were safely back where they belonged, their temporary journey into the world of international crime, serving as a reminder of both human greed and the importance of those who stand guard over the treasures of civilization.